Welcome to The Joy Report, a podcast dedicated to sharing stories about climate solutions through the lens of intersectionality and optimism. This podcast is brought to you by Intersectional Environmentalist, an eco-media platform dedicated to sharing stories of climate solutions from an inclusive and intersectional perspective. Tune in for a dose of climate joy and actionable steps you can take to stay informed, engaged, and connected to the movement to protect people and the planet. I'm your host, Arielle V, an environmental justice strategist and educator passionate about making environmentalism accessible and irresistible. Thank you for tuning back in, and if you're listening or watching this around the time of release, happy Black History Month. In 1926, scholar-activist Carter G. Woodson launched Negro History Week, later expanded to Black History Month, to showcase the contributions of Black Americans. In this centennial year, celebrating Black American history feels more relevant and necessary than ever. Black history is American history, and we're using this episode as an opportunity to highlight the enduring legacies and stories of Black people throughout history, whose work has helped propel the environmental justice movement forward, even before the traditional movement began. To help me explore this rich history, I am joined by Dr. Margot Brown, the Senior Vice President for Justice and Equity at the Environmental Defense Fund. Dr. Brown, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yay. And because this is the Joy Report, and we know that joy is an action, a choice, and an act of rebellion, we like to ask each of our guests, how are you sustaining your joy lately?
Oh, that is a great question. I am sustaining my joy right now by listening to music.
So, what are you listening to?
Oh, I everything. So I have three children.
Okay.
And I live in the DMV, that's the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. And it is bananas here in terms of all of their activities. And I live in the car. And I spend so much time in the car with the three of them. And I have to say that, quite honestly, Beyonce, Kendrick, Tyler, the Creator, Nina Simone, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Stevie Wonder are like additional passengers in the car.
Oh, I love that. Okay, it sounds like we might need a playlist from you or something.
I've got one. I actually have a joy playlist. And so the coolest thing about being in the car is with them is not just listening to music, but listening to the music that they play and learning like what speaks to them about Kendrick or what speaks to them about Tyler or what is it about Beyonce. And it has been the most incredible journey, and being able to just sit and understand the world through their perspective through music. So it's like, it's twofold. It's like joy through music and joy to learn more about the three humans that are my children.
Oh, that is so special. And something I can definitely relate to. I have that experience when I'm in the car with my parents as well. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And so can you give our audience a glimpse into your current role? What does the Senior Vice President for Justice and Equity at an environmental nonprofit do?
Ooh. That's a loaded question.
I'm sure.
That is a loaded question, but I will give you a short and sweet answer.
Okay.
My role at EDF is to help them build and implement climate solutions that work for people, and particularly for the people who are first and worst impacted by the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've seen in the environmental movement throughout my career is environmental and climate justice tend to be sidecars.
Right.
And if they're sidecars, I don't know how we're going to get ourselves out of this crisis. And in order to build durable solutions, they've got to be equitable. And equity looks like including the lived experience of frontline leaders, because they have such a rich wealth of knowledge. I have a saying that the people who are closest to any problem are also closest to the solution.
Absolutely.
And we cannot leave them out of the solution process. So my job is to really get EDF to understand that, get EDF to integrate justice and equity into the work of the entire organization. So again, my team and the work that we do here we're not a sidecar.
Good.
We are trying to really work with our colleagues and help them as they develop solutions that are informed by environmental and climate justice principles, tools, and resources.
Excellent and extremely necessary. So thank you for the work that you and your team does. I'm curious, what brought you to this work?
That is a great question. And there are so many moments in my life that I can tell you that brought me to this work. But
Yeah.
there's one that was probably the most profound moment I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
6 years ago, we were in the middle of a global pandemic,
Yes.
and George Floyd was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And his murder broke me.
Yeah.
I mean, it shattered me. And because that murder didn't just represent one Black man being killed, it represented 450 years of Black bodies being treated as disposable.
Yes.
And this is, I think, the saddest part of this story is I was really confused as to why everybody was out in the streets protesting. I was
Confused.
like, I was confused because sadly, this is America.
Right.
This is America, and Black people are killed all the time by the police.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was really like, what makes this one different?
Mm.
And a friend of mine was like, Margot, you have to watch the video. And I said, I don't want to see that. Do not want to see that. And she said, when you watch the video, you will see why people have taken to the streets.
Yeah.
And I did it. And when I finished watching the video, I did not cry. I wept.
Yeah.
And wept is probably not a strong enough word. And the reason why I wept was for George Floyd, for the millions of Africans who were lost in the slave trade,
Yeah.
for my children, for this country. I wept. And I wept because there were so many Black people that were treated the same way as George Floyd. And the only difference was their murder was not caught on video.
Right.
And so a profound sadness came over me. I am a woman of deep, deep faith. And in that moment, I felt paralyzed because I was at home with my husband and we are teleworking and trying to get 3 children on a Zoom and participate in a Montessori Zoom class. If you have ever, you have not lived. You have not lived until you've had to participate in a kindergarten Montessori Zoom class.
Oh.
And I was like, what do I do? What do I do in this moment? We had taken all of our vacation money and given it to causes, but all of that felt like it didn't feel like enough. And I know it wasn't enough. So I prayed to ask God to give me the strength and the ability to actualize my skills and my knowledge and my voice.
Wow.
And I sent that prayer out into the universe. And maybe a couple months later, I saw this position posted at EDF. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this position was written for me.
Yeah.
And my coach said, Margot, let me see it. I said, I promise you it's written for me. And he read it and he said, this position was written for you. Yeah. And I applied. And a few months later, I got the job. And I have to say, outside of being a wife and a mother, this is the greatest job of my life.
Wow.
And it's the greatest job of my life because I'm working in my purpose, which is totally different. I have so many people around me where this is a career and they're dedicated to the career.
Yeah.
But there is a profound difference in working one's career and working in one's purpose. And while I came to EDF through pain I am now here because of purpose. And that purpose drives me every day.
I'm curious if you can dive a little deeper into what that purpose is and what made this such an aligned opportunity from the previous work that you were doing, and yeah, what brought you to identifying this as so aligned with your purpose.
For 10 years before I joined EDF, I was a civil servant. I worked at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency,
Okay.
primarily on children's health. And I was focused on health disparities, and I did a ton of work with my colleagues in the Office of Environmental Justice.
Mm-hmm.
And we were constantly trying to come up with creative ways to build programs and to really uplift children's health disparities. And I just couldn't break through, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I had a number of bosses, and I was like, if I just explain this a little different, if I just come across in a different way, they'll understand. And I was growing terrifically frustrated because initially I thought it was me. And then I recognized, Margot, you're in a regulatory agency, and the kind of work that you want to do is not the work of the organization that you're currently in.
Right.
And the saddest is I really believed that Hillary Clinton was going to be elected.
We all did.
And wait.
Like, yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'd had that revelation, and I was like, the minute she gets elected, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that I knew to be true was that if there was a Trump administration, and we saw it, a number of jobs would be removed immediately. And if people left, those individuals in those positions would never be replaced.
Sure.
And when he won, I was like, oh no, because I knew that I had to sit in that role for another 4 years. And that was probably one of the hardest times of my life professionally. It was so hard that there were many, many days I sought solace in the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
What a beautiful place.
Yes, a stunning place. If you know anything about Washington, D.C., or even if you don't, the EPA is catty corner to that museum. And
it is.
My office sat in the corner of the building. And so I just would walk across the street. And I would go down to the first floor, or the ground floor of the museum. Mm. And I would take a moment and read a plaque or sit with an artifact. And I was like, you know what? Go back to your desk and figure this out.
Yeah.
No one is killing you.
Right.
You have an air-conditioned office with all the resources you need. Go back and figure this out.
Wow.
And that's what I did for 4 years.
Yeah.
And again, I remained hopeful that Joe Biden would get elected. And when he did, it was my opportunity to go. And for the first time in my professional career, I had a level of freedom I've never had before.
Yeah.
Which is why you asked about why this particular role. At EDF, they had been doing environmental justice work for decades, but it was in like these teeny little pockets. So you'd have like a great project or a team of 4 or 5 people who were knocking environmental justice out of the park. Mm-hmm. But there was not a coordinated effort across the organization. And that's where I came in. Yeah. And so I had a blank canvas to build something that had never been built before. And imagine working in your purpose and being allowed to build something that hadn't been built before. And you're carrying all of those memories of a time when you were sitting in an organization and you weren't allowed to articulate your voice.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, Margot, okay. And it was just like, Oh, wow, this is great. And so it really is, it was a perfect alignment. It was an answered prayer.
Wow. And for our listeners who aren't aware, that ground floor of the National Black, what are we calling it? The African American Museum, the Smithsonian in DC, is all about the enslavement of African people. And the entire museum goes up chronologically. And so with each floor, you are traveling through time to see our advancements in the ways that Black Americans have persevered and endured and thrived and contributed so much to the movement. And yeah, hearing that you spent time specifically on that bottom level as a reminder to keep going is just so extremely powerful. And so I also think it's valuable and really interesting to note that not only did you start your position in 2020 after George Floyd, so many organizations created positions like yours in the wake of this George Floyd era. But there was a lot of issues with retention for Black women who were coming in to fix companies or work to integrate equity and justice principles into this work. And so I think it's a testament to you and a testament to the organization that you are still here, you are being supported, and you're able to sustain this in a meaningful way. So yeah, very excited to hear that.
Yeah.
What was your introduction to the environmental justice movement? This is something I'd love to ask all environmental justice advocates because we all come at it in different ways. We're all introduced to it in different ways. So yeah, I'm just curious, where did your beginning start?
My beginning started in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
So I got my master's and my PhD from Tulane University.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody knows anything about Southern Louisiana, it is ground zero for environmental justice.
Absolutely.
And you have just this insane collision of petrochemical companies,
Mm-hmm.
sea level rise, devastating hurricanes, and systemic racism.
Yes.
And they're all coming together in one place at one time. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Sure.
So, as part of my PhD research, I had probably one of the most transformative experiences of my life. I had the distinct honor of working with Margie Richard. She is a Goldman winner and an environmental justice pioneer.
Yes.
And I was doing my dissertation research in Norco, Louisiana. So, for listeners who don't know where Norco is about 25 miles northwest of New Orleans, and it sits in an area called Cancer Alley. So, Cancer Alley is a stretch of land along the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge.
Right.
And that area is covered with petrochemical plants and Black communities
Yes.
that live directly alongside there. As my dissertation research, I was looking at the health and environmental concerns of people in fence line communities. And I had the opportunity to work with Miss Margie. And while I was learning so much in my classes, I was taking environmental toxicology and statistics, my greatest learning came in the passenger seat of Miss Margie's car. She would pick me up from a bus stop and we would drive all around Cancer Alley, and she gave me an education that I could never find in a book.
Wow.
It was an education based on lived experience. And that time transformed my life. And once I saw Norco, once I saw Cancer Alley, I could never unsee it.
Yeah.
It is a visceral, it is something that impacts your soul and your spirit, and you can't ever unsee it again. And I am profoundly grateful to all of the time that Miss Margie gave me and allowed me to learn from her, and to know that environmental justice isn't just about study, it's about a fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, and for listeners, just to add a little bit more color to what Cancer Alley is, it's a 85-mile corridor, and there are almost 200 of these petrochemical facilities that are polluting this predominantly Black region. This and so much of the history is also overlaid with the enslavement of African people and the existence of plantations along that same route. And yeah, it's such a rich history of exploitation and harm. And the environmental justice movement is an act of resistance and a demand for inclusion and an opportunity for everyday people to get involved in the fight to protect themselves and to ensure equal consideration and equal rights under environmental laws and regulations. And because we're at a moment where environmental justice as we know it is being undermined and rolled back and erased and misinterpreted at the federal level, I'm wondering, Dr. Brown, if you can provide some clarity on what environmental injustice actually is. And I know we've talked about it a little, but if you could just elaborate some more.
I'm a big believer in telling stories.
Yes.
So I'm going to share a story with you because environmental injustice is not something that can be put neatly into a box.
Right.
And as you said, one of the things that's happened in the last year is we've had this conflation of environmental justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
And with that conflation, it's like, this isn't something we should be doing. I would encourage everyone to go to Cancer Alley to see what environmental justice looks like. Yeah. Norco, Louisiana is environmental injustice. Mm-hmm. So Norco, Louisiana is home to Shell Chemical and Motiva Oil Refinery. Mm-hmm. And at the time of my dissertation, they were producing about 300,000 barrels of oil a day.
Wow.
I didn't stutter. 300,000 barrels of oil a day.
Insane.
And at that time, there had been a lawsuit waged by Miss Margie against Shell Chemical because she believed that the proximity to those plants were killing people in the community. Mm-hmm. And part of Norco is a subdivision called Diamond.
Okay.
And Diamond is home to people who are descendants of slaves. And these people were dying. They had high rates of asthma, preterm birth, all of the things that you see when you're exposed to, and high cancer rates, obviously, all the things that you see in a place like Cancer Alley. And there's a but to this story, because this is the wildest part of my dissertation research. Greater Norco, the people were thriving. Thriving. This is a tiny, tiny community.
Yeah.
We're talking about 700 homes on 2.9 square miles of land. So it's a densely populated community. And I was like, what in the Sam Hill is going on here? Like, how do you have these Black people who are really sick?
Yeah.
And a white community that is thriving because they're all breathing the same air. But there was a big difference. And this is where systemic racism comes in.
Yeah.
Most of the people who lived in Greater Norco worked for those plants. So they had stable job. Yep. They had quality housing. They had access to healthcare. In Diamond, many of the people who inhabited that land, as I said, they were descendants of slaves and then descendants of sharecroppers.
Right.
And at no point during the plant's history did they ever welcome the Black residents to work in the plant. And so what you saw play out was really systemic racism at like its apex.
Right.
And when you ask me what environmental injustice looks like, it looks like Norco.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Environmental justice encompasses so many intersecting areas of expertise and requires so many different types of solutions. And this is, of course, the Black History Month episode. So I would love to switch gears a little bit to explore some of the lives of some notable figures who have contributed to environmental history and the way that we engage with the environment today. So let's start with George Washington Carver, who way too many people only know as the man who invented peanut butter, which is technically not even true. So, can you share a little bit about the greater legacy of his research and his scholarship?
Glad you asked me this question
Yes.
because he was not just the peanut guy. And
Not at all.
that is how he, like, that's what I learned when I was little.
Same.
That was,
Yeah.
yeah. And what a lot of people don't understand is that he was a conservationist,
Yes.
he was an educator,
Mhm.
and he was a visionary.
Yes.
He was a slave who ended up going to college and then building a college himself to educate Black people around food sovereignty.
Yes.
He was also so instrumental in regenerative agriculture.
Yes.
The
Absolutely.
land that he was living on had been so destroyed by the cotton industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to teach hundreds of Black people how to regenerate that soil, to grow food, to sustain themselves and build livelihoods. And when we think about him, we really need to think about him as this visionary who was an expert in conservation,
Yes.
who spent his life educating Black people.
Yes. He also invented the Jessup wagon, which is a mobile classroom that brought agricultural education directly to rural farmers, which I believe is such an impressive and beautiful way of busting through the ivory tower to make research accessible to people who need it the most. And yeah, I mean, his story is so rich and so layered. And yeah, it's such a necessary thing to really position him as the environmental icon that he truly was. Yeah, I also think about how in 1916 he released the bulletin that was titled How to Grow the Peanut and 105 Ways of Preparing It for Human Consumption, which included recipes and all of these other things. And so, yeah, his legacy is so rich and so layered. And I love the point that you made of the fact that he was enslaved, but the fact that he worked so hard to educate himself because he understood what that would do for so many other people. He followed his passion and love for plants and allowed that to change the agriculture industry as we know it, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would love to switch gears a little and move from Alabama over to Mississippi and talk about Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. When was the first time that you encountered Fannie Lou Hamer's work?
I think the first time that I truly encountered her work was
Mhm.
as an undergraduate at the University of Pittsburgh. I
Okay.
had a double major in anthropology and Africana studies.
Okay.
And
Nice.
what's really interesting about that is at the time I learned about her famous quote of, she's sick and tired of being sick and tired
Mhm.
and all of her work. What I didn't learn until much later in life, as you just said, she was that continuation of Carver. She was somebody who didn't just protest. She built solutions.
Yes.
She built that Freedom Farm Cooperative. And there were hundreds of acres that she was able to secure for Black people.
Yes.
And what I think is so interesting or cool about both of their stories is it really centered around food sovereignty and food justice.
Yes.
And a
Absolutely.
lot of times when we think about environmental justice, we think about a situation like Norco,
Mhm.
but food sovereignty is a huge part of the environmental justice movement. And
Yes.
if you think about the time that she was doing this work, it was remarkable that she was able to acquire all of this land
Yeah.
in rural Mississippi and build a cooperative. I describe Carver as a conservationist, an educator, and a visionary. I think the three words definitely apply to her. And it applies back to
100%.
her quote. She demonstrated, like, don't just be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Get up and go do something. And
Mhm.
boy, did she do it.
Yes. Yes. And I also think that her legacy is so intertwined in so many different industries. I initially was going to ask you whether your first connection to her was from an agriculture or from like a civil and voting rights perspective, because she was
With
a leader in
civil and
both of
voting rights. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was the same way for me. I got to go down to Mississippi for like the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer, and I got to go to Sunflower County, Mississippi, where she was one of the first Black people registered to vote. And there's a beautiful statue of her in her home county, and that was my first introduction to her work. And then I later learned about just all of the incredible ways that she contributed to so many different movements. And her family started out owning land. They didn't start out as sharecroppers. They owned land, and their white neighbors poisoned the feed in their farm, and it led to them no longer being able to sustain their land, and it led to them eventually having to become sharecroppers. And I always think that's a really fascinating part of her story, and a heartbreaking, of course, part of her story. I also think about the fact that she contributed so much to the civil rights movement and the environmental movement with a elementary school education. I think the difference between her and George Washington Carver is that she stopped going to school around the third grade, and yet she continued and sustained that legacy so much. And she worked so hard to show up for her community and to give of herself in the most loving and benevolent ways.
Absolutely. And I think that is a testament to her ability to keep moving forward because
Yes.
while, as you said, while we know her as, well, I should say, as I first came to know her as a civil rights, a major player in the
Yeah.
civil rights movement, I
Mhm.
did not learn until later, like the role that she played in building solutions for our communities. And
Yes.
that goes back to that lived experience.
Hmm.
While George Washington Carver had a formal education, she did not, but she had a deep lived experience, and we must never underestimate or undervalue the lived experiences of individuals like Miss Hamer.
Because that's really what environmental justice is about. So,
Yeah.
absolutely. We're going to move up north to Chicago. I would love to talk about Hazel M. Johnson, who is often considered the mother of the environmental justice movement. What do you think makes her story so significant?
Her story is the same story that we've been talking about. It's the
Yeah.
lived experience.
Hmm.
So, for folks who are listening who don't know who Hazel Johnson is, she was a resident of a Chicago community that was part of what was called a toxic donut.
Right.
So, if you imagine a community that's like the middle or the whole of the donut, and then you had landfills and industry that surrounded the entire community,
Right.
and this community was black and it was poor. And one of the things that got Miss Johnson going was the death of her husband.
Hmm.
So her husband died when he was only 41 years old from lung cancer.
Right.
And it was sort of a wake up call for her because she's looking around and she's like, wait, there are a lot of people in my community with cancer or respiratory diseases or other conditions that you shouldn't see at these ages.
Not at all.
And that's what got her going. And she was able to not only build the People Recovery for Community, I believe that was the name of her organization,
Yes.
I think the most interesting thing about her that she was one of the first people to require the Environmental Protection Agency to study
Yes.
the health outcomes of her community. And I think that's what makes her story so unique is that she was able to take that lived experience and tie it to her proximity to all of these toxic areas and then demand that the federal government come and look at what was going on in her community. In 1979, that was revolutionary.
Absolutely.
I mean, at that point, the Environmental Protection Agency wasn't even a decade old.
I was going to say it was still very new at that point. Absolutely.
And the fact that she had the foresight and the determination to say, you need to come and look at what I'm experiencing and tell me I'm wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And it's, the story is so cyclical. It is that visceral reaction.
Yes.
It is that lived experience. It's all of these key themes that keep tying the threads of environmental justice tighter and tighter. And her story is one that exemplifies all of those things.
Absolutely. Because even while she was making those demands at the federal level, she was going around her community and making sure that her neighbors were aware of the issues that were causing harm to the air that they breathe and making the land around their housing complex unsafe for children to play in. There's so many valuable lessons from Hazel M. Johnson's story, and she was also instrumental in ensuring that Bill Clinton enacted the first environmental justice executive order, 12898, which was used widely for advancing environmental justice at the federal level. And yes, just so many other things. So her story is so, so, so important. I would love for us to maybe switch gears or industries a little bit and talk about art and storytelling, because art and storytelling, I believe, are some of the most compelling and accessible tools that we have to shift mindsets, inform the masses, and drive real change. And I'd love to first start to talk about Zora Neale Hurston, who, among many other things, was an author and anthropologist who many consider the first Black filmmaker. I'm curious, how would you say her legacy connects to the environmental movement?
Her legacy has a profound impact on the environmental justice movement. I, I think one of the things that is not widely known in America is that Black women are the stewards of the environment.
Yes.
And Black female artists are the ones who tell that story over and over and over again. One of the things that I think Black women do incredibly well, and especially Black female artists like Zora Neale Hurston, is they're able to shape the relationship to place, to land, and to one another.
Yes.
And she so beautifully did that in her writings. And what was so amazing to me is that she held this amazing tension in her work. She held joy and catastrophe together.
Yes.
And her writing was so beautiful, and her ability to, like, visually, in your visual mind's eye, be able to understand that joy and to access that joy and to access also catastrophe. And their eyes are watching God. That story is a great, like, example of the 1928 Okeechobee hurricane and how that hurricane destroyed Black communities in coastal Florida.
Yes.
And we think about Hurricane Katrina and we think about all of these different hurricanes throughout our history, but this is nothing new. We have been experiencing this for centuries as Black people.
Yeah.
And her ability as an artist to create that connection and bring in millions upon millions of people. I remember, as a college student, it wasn't just the Black students who were reading that book.
Yeah.
There were so many students who were reading that book. And I completely agree with you. I think art is one of the best ways to bring people to understanding climate change, understanding
Yes.
environmental justice, and understanding climate justice. I actually think not probably one of the best. I think it is the best way.
Yeah.
Because with art, each person experiences a work of art differently.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is art transforms how we think about the world, how we perceive the world. It makes us question injustice. And for Black women to be the stewards of those stories and environmentalism is just, I think it's one of their greatest gifts. I mean, we have so many gifts that we've given to the world, but in my opinion, this is definitely one of the greatest gifts we've given.
I would have to agree. And there are so many people, and Black women who stand on the shoulders of Zora Neale Hurston. And I think one of my favorite examples or anecdotes relating to Zora specifically was the fact that she died destitute. She didn't ever get to see the ways that her work would transform the world. But while Alice Walker was in college and learning about Zora Neale Hurston's work, and while she was doing this investigation, she became obsessed and in love with the way that she tied all of these themes, exactly as you mentioned, and kept Black vernacular English in her writing, which I think is a really beautiful and important point to bring up. But Alice Walker was responsible for adding a headstone to Zora Neale Hurston's grave because there wasn't one before. And I think that is just one of the most beautiful examples of the ways that Black women show up for each other and give honor and reverence to where we've come from and where we must continue to go in order to share important stories that will transform the world. So.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we could probably have a whole separate episode on like the Black women artists who have transformed the environmental movement.
I'm happy to come back and talk about that anytime.
Okay, yeah, let's think about that. Yeah, more to come on that. But I'm curious, past or present, who are some of your environmental justice heroes?
Well, that is a great question. And I know I'm going to leave many people out, but on the thread of Black women, I have to say that my environmental justice heroes are 3 Black women who are my rock. And that is Peggy Shepard, Dr. Beverly Wright, and Bernice Miller Travis.
I mean, that's a solid 3.
No. But you have to understand. So Peggy has been on the board at EDF for more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. And she was the one who was calling for this role for a very long time. And once I got in this role, I can call Peggy morning, noon, night, Saturday, Sunday, whenever, to ask her for advice. And she always offers that advice with a huge laugh and just incredible brilliance, and is such a force of nature. I mean, all 3 of them are.
Yes.
Like these incredible forces of nature. Dr. Wright, I studied her research when I was when I was at Tulane and I was doing work in Norco. Yes. And to meet these people and to now say that they're my mentors is wild.
Yeah.
It is completely wild. When I got to EDF, I had known Bernice from my time at the Environmental Protection Agency.
Mhm.
And she had done a lot of consulting work. And as I was building up my programming, I called her and I said, I need your help. And she said, I got you. She said, don't worry, I got you. And in this role, the three of them are my sounding boards. Like I said, they are my rock. And I am so grateful for all that they've done, not just for me as an individual, but for the movement and for humanity.
Oh, yes, yes. And so, for listeners who don't know, one, you should look each of these women up. Please do. But just brief cliff notes for each of them. Miss Peggy Shepherd is the founder of We Act for Environmental Justice, one of the first and oldest environmental justice organizations in the country, has done tremendous work at the state level here in New York, which is where I live. I live in Harlem, which is where We Act is based, to just advance so many environmental justice initiatives. You know, again, separate episode could be made just about Miss Peggy. Dr. Beverly Wright is the founder of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice based in New Orleans. And she is a brilliant scholar who has also contributed so much and continues to support Cancer Alley, among many other parts of Louisiana and the Southeast region in general. And then Miss Vernice Miller Travis is currently the vice president of the Metropolitan Group, but she is also one of the co-authors of the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice, along with the Toxic Waste and Race Report, which is one of the first national studies to investigate the correlation between the existence of toxic facilities in the U.S. and people of color communities, particularly Black and Brown communities. And it was the first national study of its type. So each of them has contributed so much to the movement for environmental justice, and so many of us stand on their shoulders and honor their work in every way. So what an honor for all three of them to be people that you consider mentors and heroes. They're also heroes of mine, so I completely relate, and it's such a pleasure to anytime to get to chat with them and learn from them and read their work. They are just icons in every way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think
Yeah.
of the last week, I know I've talked to all three of them
Yeah.
about like a different issue. I would also like to lift up, though, the Sharon Levines of the world.
Yes.
Sharon Levine, for your listeners, is a school teacher
Mm-hmm.
from Southern Louisiana who lived in Cancer Alley, who fought to stop one of the largest plastic companies from coming into her community. And she won.
And did.
She won.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, you look at somebody like a Miss Margie or Miss Sharon who took the fight to these massive companies and won.
Freedom.
And the thing that I love the most about Miss Sharon, I mean, it's probably just her smile and her laugh, and also that we are born a day apart from one another. But I'd have to say it's her profound faith and her tenacity and just the way in which she navigates the world authentically as Sharon Levine and no one else. And I think that's true of
Yes.
all of these women, like Dr. Wright,
Definitely.
Peggy,
Oh, yeah.
Bernice, Margie, Sharon, like the way they navigate the world with authenticity and being unapologetically Black is just
Yes.
every day I'm like, I just want to grow up to be just like them. Every day I want to grow up to be
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
like them.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for lifting up Miss Sharon Levine, also a Goldman Prize winner. They're, just a brilliant, brilliant mind and such a loving and yeah, all of these women just so extremely unapologetic in the ways that they show up in any room that they enter, representing us, especially in rooms where we're often not present. And so their voices are so invaluable to this movement, and their work is invaluable to this movement. So we're wrapping up. We're getting to the end. I'm so loving this conversation. I'm curious, what is your vision for the future of environmentalism?
That's a great question. My vision is centering lived expertise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For far too long, it's been the same people in the same rooms who are driving policy and who are driving the funding towards environmental solutions.
Yep.
And those people do not look like us.
Nope.
Those people do not look like Peggy or Vernice or Miss Sharon or Miss Margie or Dr. Wright. And guess what? We're still about to blow past 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Right.
It's time. The time is now. It's long overdue to give everyone a seat at the table. So when you ask me what's my vision, it's centering lived experience.
Beautiful.
It's centering different experiences. It's centering faith and joy and resilience and all of the things that make the Black experience in America so amazing. It's centering those learnings, centering the learnings of not just Black people, but our Indigenous brothers and sisters,
Yes.
our Latinx brothers and sisters, and centering this knowledge and saying, you know what, maybe someone else has something really important to add.
Right. Right. Yeah. And when solutions and decisions prioritize those who are most likely to be greatly impacted, everyone benefits,
Everybody benefits.
Everyone benefits. So like, what if we started in that way, right?
That is the one thing that I always talk to my colleagues about at EDF. And I was like, imagine if you built a solution, and we do a lot of modeling. And I'd say, imagine if you built a model, and in your model, you included things like essentially do no harm. Imagine if whatever climate solution you were going to look at was not going to be harmful to people.
Yeah.
Or it would be the minimum amount of harm. Because guess what? Not only do those frontline communities benefit, as you said, we all benefit. We all win.
Everybody wins. Exactly. And so I'm also curious, how does the Frontline Resources Institute fit into this vision that you have?
That's a great question. So when I got to EDF, I knew I had a lot of work to do. And one of the things that I am a firm believer in is radical listening. And I wanted to learn what folks thought I should be doing in my role.
Yeah.
And in about a period of 6 months, I had 200 conversations.
Wow.
And I would have a conversation with anybody who would talk to me. And in these conversations, probably within the first 10 or 15, the word capacity came up. And it came up over and over again.
Sure.
And what was really interesting about the repetition was it did not matter who the individual was. So I could have an EDF trustee who was tepid at best that EDF should be doing environmental justice work. Or I could be talking to someone like Dr. Bullard who would say, these organizations should be paying reparations for the harm that they've done. And everyone in between, the word capacity came up over and over and over again. And from those conversations, we built the Frontline Resource Institute. So the Frontline Resource Institute, or FREE as we call it, is a project of EDF. And we built the Frontline Resource Institute knowing what we didn't know. And we knew that we had no knowledge or insight into what it was like to actually lead a frontline organization or live in a frontline community. So we developed a conceptual committee. And these are 11 people who engage in a meaningful interaction between a mainstream or a large environmental NGO and frontline activists and advocates. And this has probably been one of the greatest projects of my life because Vernice was instrumental in helping me build it. And Peggy is a member of the conceptual committee. And Sharon Levine's daughter, Shamira Levine, is also a member of this conceptual committee. And the amount of wisdom and guidance in that committee is unreal.
Wow.
And we meet quarterly, and I close every meeting with them with saying that in life, time is one of our greatest commodities. And they choose to spend their time with me, helping to make the world a better place. They don't have to do that. Their plates are overflowing. They can go out and do a million other things. And the fact that they choose to do this work with me and my team is it is the greatest gift.
It's beautiful. What are some resources, books, essays that you would recommend to people interested in learning about the connection between Black history and environmental justice?
There are two that I give every single time, and I'm going to give them again. You mentioned one of them earlier. It's Toxic Waste and Race.
Yes.
This was a landmark study because it was the first time that there was a direct correlation between race and where toxic facilities were sited. That report was done almost 40 years ago.
Yep.
Fun fact, friends, it's still the same today.
Yeah. Race is still the single most significant indicator of whether a community will live near or in proximity to a hazardous or toxic waste facility. Yeah, 40 years
And
ago.
the other is Dumping on Dixie, because it tells the story of environmental racism. And I love those two pieces because when you combine data with story, you shift movement.
Yes.
And for anybody who wants to learn about this work, those are the two places that I would encourage everyone to start.
Okay. And we will be sure to add those to the show notes so that folks can find them on their own. In one word, how would you describe Black environmental joy?
Defiance.
Defiance. Oh, that's
Defiance.
yeah.
Defiance has a negative connotation. I do not see it.
Yeah.
That's right. I don't see it that way at all. Defiance is what has fueled our contributions to this society as Black people.
Absolutely.
Without that defiance, we wouldn't have had a George Washington Carver. We wouldn't have Tuskegee. We wouldn't have the fight that Miss Sharon won. And that defiance to me is joy because it encompasses our survival and our brilliance. And I just think it's the strongest thing. And what I think about defiance is Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise. And I want to share an excerpt with you and the listeners because this embodies defiance. And I'm going to read here just because I don't want to mess it up. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of a slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. You can't rise without defiance.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you can't rise without joy in a movement that's rooted in something more than hate and anger, and it must be rooted in connection and community and dance and reasons to stay connected to one another. So thank you for sharing that quote. We'll also add the whole rest of the poem to the show notes because it's important. It's Black History Month. And so our final question that we like to ask all of our guests is, what is something in the news or in your recent discoveries that has brought you joy lately?
So after this election, I stopped watching the news.
Smart.
Completely stopped watching it. And the only thing I do now is listen to NPR.
Okay.
And every now and again, I will watch PBS NewsHour. And recently, there was an interview with Alicia Graf Mack. She is the new director for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater.
Oh.
And just seeing a Black woman hold that position, I mean, we had Alvin Ailey, then we had Judith Jamison, and Judith Jamison, in my mind, was it. She was the pinnacle.
Everything and more, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to have a new Black woman taking the helm of Alvin Ailey brings me so much joy. And I think about every time I think about Alvin Ailey, you can't think about Alvin Ailey and not think about Revelations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this dance piece encompasses our entire conversation.
100%.
It encompasses the history of Black people in this country. It encompasses our relationship with land. Mm-hmm. It encompasses our faith. It encompasses our joy. Yeah. And I am so happy because on Sunday, my 11-year-old and I are going to go see Alvin Ailey.
Oh, yay.
This will be her first time. She's a dancer.
Wow.
And she's a serious dancer. She dances 5 days a week.
Wow.
And I can't wait to watch those pieces through her eyes.
Yeah. Oh, I am so excited for you and your daughter. The first time I saw Alvin Ailey was around that age with my mom. So that's really special. I'm really, really excited for you too. Dr. Brown, this has been such an enriching and phenomenal conversation. I just want to thank you so much for your time and for all that you do to advance the environmental justice movement. Thank you so much for being on the Joy Report.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to bring these stories and these issues to thousands of people. I really, really appreciate all that you do, and thank you for having me. And I'd love to come back and talk about art at any time.
Okay, yeah, no, we're going to make that happen. I really want to make that happen.
Yeah.
So to our listeners, if you enjoyed or learned something from this episode, please consider leaving us a review, sharing it with at least one friend, and keeping the conversation going by posting about it on social media and tagging us. Make sure you're following Intersectional Environmentalist on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack so you don't miss any updates. And remember, fighting the climate crisis is a marathon, not a sprint. We need everyone to get involved in a way that feels right for them now more than ever. Our individual positive actions do have power, and they're strengthened when we do them as a collective. I'm your host, Arielle V. King, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Joy Report.